Hello, how are you, all my viewers? Today I'm going to talk about a new video. It's about ancient Egyptian history. But before I start, I'd like to direct a very sincere welcome to all of you. Welcome to our journey through the sands of time, where we explore the fascinating world of ancient Egypt, from the iconic pyramids to the enigmatic Sphinx and the rich tapestry of gods and goddesses. Ancient Egypt has captivated the imagination of people for centuries. Join us as we unravel the mysteries and marvel the achievements and uncover the stories of the Egyptian civilization that has shaped history in ways that still echo today. Let's embark on this adventure to discover the wonders of ancient Egypt. So don't go in for us. The beginning of civilization in Egypt is signalized by a noteworthy event, the unification of the country into a single nation, whose boundaries run from the sea in the north of the first cataract of Aswan. We know very little about political organization before this consolidation. We assume that the small tribal units of the early pre-dynastic gradually amalgamated and formed larger social and political groupings. Around approximately 3400 BC, a great change took place in Egypt as the country passed rapidly from a state of advanced culture with a complex tribal character to two well-organized monarchies, one comprising the Delta area and the other Nile Valley. Each kingdom had its own set of symbols and its own protective gods and goddesses. The brief description of the two great pre-dynastic kingdoms is based almost entirely on evidence from later period. It's an unexpected fact that no tomb has yet been found which might have belonged to a pre-dynastic king of the north or south. The Egyptian civilization was developed to an extent we assume that the Delta was more advanced than Upper Egypt in that time. In the Delta, the seat of worship of Horus, the hawk, was beginning in the western Delta, whereas in the eastern Delta there was another good god dominating, and Jeti. Later on, Horus became the supreme deity of the whole Delta. In Upper Egypt, Seth was the supreme god. The seat of his worship was Naupet in Qena Governorate. It happened that the Delta conquered Upper Egypt, resulting in only one kingdom, and Horus became more important than Seth in the late prehistoric period. The seat of his worship was Hierakonpolis, modern Qom el-Ahmar, to the north of Edfu. Its ancient name was Nekhen, but finally the balance of power changed and the Delta was in the end subjugated by the rulers of Upper Egypt. Before this unification, the original capitals of the two states appear to have been Utu in Lower Egypt in Western Delta, nowadays Tel El Farahin. Its goddess was Wadjet, the Cobra goddess. Its king wore the red crown Dishart. That was originally in palm or crown of goddess niece of Sis, Sa el Hajar. Papyrus was in palm of Lower Egypt. The king's authority of this kingdom was extended to include the delta and small portion of the beginning of Upper Egypt. The king of Upper Egypt took El Kab as his capital, Nekheb. It was originally the seat of worship of goddess Nekhbet, the vulture, the king of Upper Egypt. Wore the white crown, Hejit. His emblem was the lotus flower, The borders of this kingdom extended until it reached the first cataract. This is some reason to suppose that at an earlier period, the northern kingdom conquered the south and its kings ruled the whole of Egypt for a time. The god Horus became the chief god in both kingdoms. The king in each kingdom was the representative of Horus on earth during his life. After his death, he becomes identified with Osiris. The king was given a name at his coronation other than his name at birth, which is the Horus name. This new one was written inside rectangle surikh, surmounted by a figure of the good Horus, and the surikh usually is decorated by a representation of the facade of the palace. The king used both names, or he can use only one of them. However, when the north and south became unified, the king wore the double crown. He kept the Horus name as did the previous kings. There is some certainty gained about this first unification after the study of the Palermo stone, especially one of its pieces displayed at the Cairo Museum. We are not sure about the capital of this united kingdom, but most scholars agree that Heliopolis was the capital. There is no doubt that the civilization of the Delta resulted in great monuments, especially in the capital and chief cities. The objects that we have of this era are not only pottery and cosmetics objects, but a new development took place. The upper part of the ivory combs were no more made in the form of animals, but became decorated on both sides with scenes of different animals drawn in registers. We also find the hands of flint knives made of ivory or sheets of gold. Their both sides were decorated with animal scenes to indicate certain events, such as the victory over the enemies. The chest pallets that were used for branding the makeup alcohol also developed. Those made for kings become bigger and were decorated with scenes of animals, some of which were arranged in register while others are being hunted. We have found also some mace heads decorated with scenes of wars commemorating the victory of owners over their enemies. The king may be represented as a Apollo overcoming his enemies, or a lion. Sometimes we see the captives tied by rope, or we find fortress being captured and the captives' names are written inside. Some statues and household objects, some of ivory, others of mud, and some models of boat and houses were found. From studying these objects of art, we get to know the artistic principles of the Egyptian history. Okay, guys, let's talk about the first dynasty. Two main changes appear to mark the beginning of the first dynasty. The first thing is the spread in use of writing. The second point is the foundings of Memphis. The first king in the first dynasty, whose name is known from later king lists and from classical sources in their own time, these kings were mostly known by their Horus name, the official royal element in the tutelary, and not by their birth names, which are those used in the list. As a result, both the identification and existence of Menes are disputed, but he is most probably the same as King Aha, to whose reign dates the earliest tomb at Saqqara. For this reason, we are still in doubt whether the three names are for one person, or for two persons, or for three persons. He had his tomb at Abydos. Some objects dating to his reign were found in the temple at Nechin. Heracleopolis, and Qom al-Ahmar. To him is attributed a silent palette of green chests displayed at the Cairo Museum on both sides of the palette. The scenes are different in detail, but they agree to commemorate the victory of the king over his enemies. On the first register on both sides, we find the name Narmer, RMR, written inside the rectangular shape that represents the facade of the palace. On either side of the name, the head of the goddess Hathor exists in the form of a face of a woman with the ears and horns of a cow. On the left side, we see the king standing wearing the white crown and holding an enemy from his forehead. This enemy is kneeling in front of the king. He is called Wash. The king is holding in his right hand a mace head to smite the enemy with. In front of the king, we see God Horus in the shape of falcon controlling an enemy by a rope tied around his nose. The enemy is represented with his head projecting from horizontal red bar from which rise behind the enemy's head six papyrus stems, on which is resting the leg of the falcon. Each stem gives the number 1,000. This indicates that God Horus controls the enemies of the king, and he is presented 6,000 captives among them. Behind the king is his sandal bearer holding in one hand jar, while in the other hand he is holding the sandal of the king. On the last register, we find two enemies fleeing. Above each of them is inscribed his name. On the first side, on the second register, we find King Narmer represented wearing the red crown behind him in his sandal bearer. In front of the king is another high official preceded by the standard bearer, who are caring for impalm at the top of the standards. Standard bearers who are carrying for impalms at the top of the standards. At the right end of this register, we have two rows of enemies, each of whom has his head cut and his hands tied behind the back and his legs twisted to the inside, except for two of them of the beginning, of the first row, who are perhaps the chiefs of enemies. The king is marching in procession with his officials and the standard bearers of his armies to view the captured bodies of his northern enemies. On the third register, we find two animals with long necks intertwined to form a circle in the middle. Two attendants are holding these animals by means of ropes to stop them from fighting. On the fourth register, the king is in the form of a bull attacking a fortress with his horns. By reaching this part, I'd like to say thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the history of ancient Egypt. Actually, this was the first episode or the first video to show you something important about the history of the Egyptian history. We hope you have enjoyed exploring the mysteries and marvels today of one of the world's most extraordinary civilization, with the grandeur of the pharaohs to the everyday lives of its people. Ancient Egypt continues to inspire and intrigue you. Stay tuned for more episodes as we continue to delve into the stories and the secrets of this timeless land. Until next time, may the wisdom of the ancients guide you. Thank you and goodbye. Have a nice time.